This is In the Moment. I am your host, Mohammad Ramadan, owner and founder of Ramadan & Associates, a Chicago-based law firm focusing on business and personal injury law. Listen in as we discuss everyday legal topics, a legal podcast made for everyday people, not just lawyers. What's up, everybody? This is attorney Mohammad Ramadan, and this is In the Moment. And today we're going to be talking about a subject that everybody wants to talk about, but nobody wants to be a part of. And we're going to talk about divorce and everything that comes with it. Now, anybody that knows me knows I don't deal with anything involving in this, so I decided to bring an expert, my friend Mervate Mohammad. So we're going to talk about divorce, the new laws, and a bunch of other things that come with it. Before we get started, Mervate, can you please introduce yourself?
Hey, Mohammad. So my name is Mervate Mohammad, and I'm the principal attorney at Kiswani Law. We primarily handle family law cases, and that includes divorce, custody, child support, alimony, basically everything under the umbrella, including prenups and postnups.
Awesome. Okay. So we're going to get into a lot of that stuff, but first I kind of wanted to give a basic breakdown. I know the law was kind of changed or reworked or however you guys phrase it in the last year or two or so. So give us a brief breakdown on exactly what has changed, what the courts or the state changed, and what is it now, basically.
So there was an overhaul in the law in regards to alimony, which is now known as maintenance, and in child support. So it's a lot more formulaic. It's very mathematical. As far as alimony, it changed wherein it was based on both parties' gross income. And the person receiving the alimony would have to pay taxes on the alimony that they were receiving. And then that would, of course, affect the child support. Now, though, alimony is based on the net income, so if you're receiving alimony, you shouldn't be paying any of the taxes on that alimony. As far as child support, it went from being based on percentages, so depending on the children or the amount of children that you had, so if you had one child, it was usually 20% of your net income. That's no longer the case. Now it's based on both parties' incomes. It's both net incomes and the amount of overnights each of you have with the child or the children.
Okay. So basically, it is more of a formula base now, you would say?
It's very formulaic. There's an entire formula that's typed out into the statute.
Okay. And I guess my question is, if it is formula based, why is it still so damn complicated?
Ask our legislators. I don't know why it's that complicated. They try to decomplicate it, but unfortunately, when you tell people, now your child support is based on the amount of overnights you have with your child, a lot more people are going to want to litigate to get more overnights with their child. Yeah.
So they're forcing themselves to spend more time with their children, essentially.
I mean, if you want to phrase it that way, other people will say that they've always been good parents and they just want to make sure they get the credit for the child support.
Sound like a good divorce attorney.
Yeah.
Depends what you're representing. One thing I do want to ask you, and I get this from a lot of kind of male friends, they feel that the system is skewed towards the mother, the women in the situation. I know you represent men and women, so you're probably going to tread lightly on your answer, but is there any merit to their claim that they feel men kind of have a higher burden than the women does in divorce court?
I always hear this from my male clients, right? But Illinois is known to be a lot more father-friendly in comparison to other states.
Okay.
I will say I've been seeing a lot more shared custody in my more current cases in comparison to cases that maybe you've seen 5, 10, 15 years ago.
Okay.
So, to say that mothers have more of a leg up is not necessarily true. Judges are always looking at the best interests of the children, regardless of if, you're a male or you're a female, or both parents are males or both parents are females.
Do you see that as just a shift in society where a lot more women work now? I hate to sound bad, but I think men are kind of more active now in their kids' lives than I guess before, where, it was a nuclear family in the 60s and 70s. The father went to work, the mom stayed home. And I just feel like the society is just different now. Do you think that plays a role with judges, or are they just trying to be more fair now?
I think the statute itself, the way that it's written, is written to be more equitable and fair between the parties, regardless of their gender. Okay. I definitely do think society has a major role to play as well, because a lot of the moms are working moms, and a lot of the fathers want to be active. So in order for the fathers to be active, they have to be given their rights and given their parenting time.
Okay. So one thing I do want to shift on that I find plays a huge role is kind of the religious component in all of this. I know that's a big issue in our community, the Muslim community, but it affects, I think, all religious communities. Basically, with us, we have Sharia law, which has its own basis in divorce and marriage and all of that. But that doesn't always coincide with American law. And I know, there's Jewish laws that dictate marriage and Hindu laws and so on and so forth. So it's not just our community. But how do you reconcile religious code, religious law with U.S. code and U.S. law? How does that work out in the courts?
So as it pertains to divorce, I mean, the basics is we're in America, right? So church and state, they don't intermingle, depending on who you ask, but church and state don't intermingle in our legal system. So not only is it in the Muslim community, but like you pointed out, even in the Jewish community, the Christian community, etc., there are other guidelines that they have for the religious marriages, one of which is dowry, or for some people they call it mahar, or the pre-gift before the wedding. And a lot of communities have that written down in the religious ceremonies. So is that taken into consideration by courts? Well, the judges are not allowed to enforce any religious laws in the courtroom. If people want to agree to it and put it in their agreement, sure, a judge may be able to go ahead and enforce it. And, it's usually painted as a property settlement. So, we can definitely go into that if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some try to make an argument that it's a legal binding contract, that your dowry was given. So, basic law that we learned the first year of law school is offer, acceptance, consideration, right? So I've seen some lawyers try to make the argument that dowry is a binding contract that should be upheld by courts, but it doesn't seem like the divorce courts are honoring that based on a religious element.
So, I've only seen maybe a handful of cases where it was able to be argued that way because of the procedures that they put in place in order to have that agreement written up. It almost mirrored a prenup. Whereas if you just sat down and verbally agreed to this dowry, you're not going to be able to enforce it. It's not a contract. And really, it depends on which judge you're in front of, because judges have so much discretion. So, you can hear some judges say, well, you're not buying this person to be married to them. That's been told to me on a couple of cases. Or, if it's an actual written out contract where it mirrors something similar to a prenup, then yeah, you can definitely enforce it, because there is a statute and laws in regards to how prenups can be written up, should be delegated, and should be dealt with.
So yeah, let's get into prenups.
Okay.
Because, and we discussed this before on multiple occasions, and I'm sure this applies to other communities, but in our communities, it's such a taboo. And I've never understood why a prenup is such a taboo in our community. Why do you, well, let's start basic. What is a prenup? What is a postnup? And what is basically the role of a prenup and a postnup?
Okay. So I am a huge supporter of prenups. The purpose of a prenup is basically to get the two people who want to get married to be very forthcoming with one another about their income, their debt, their assets, any liabilities that they might have, and basically share that with the other person. The entire purpose of a prenup is to protect, right, your assets or your debt. Just in case you do get into a divorce or a legal separation, or if one of you predeceases, so dies before the other person. So a prenup is a very intricate contract which lays out everything that each party owns, the debts of each party, and then how you want to handle that debt, that income, that asset, if unfortunately you do go through a divorce, legal separation, death, or disability.
Okay. Does that make, let's say you do a prenup and then it comes time for divorce, does that make it that much easier to just finish the divorce? Because it's like, basically, Judge, we have a prenup, we already agreed to most things, and does that make it easier when it comes to the divorce?
So if you do your prenup right, and by right, I mean you go to an attorney who's experienced with drafting prenuptial agreements and does the required tasks in order to make sure that that prenup can be enforceable and upheld in court, then yeah, it makes it so much easier.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something about postnups, which I never knew about until we kind of started discussing this. What is a postnup and how does that work?
So a postnuptial agreement is basically almost the same as a prenup, except that you enter it after you're married.
Okay.
And with a postnup, you have a little bit more flexibility because you're able to discuss custody, you're able to discuss child support, whereas in a prenup, you're not allowed to do that because it's assumed in a prenup, you really don't know whether or not you're going to have children. You can't really lay out, the future in a prenup. Whereas with a postnup, you can discuss your current children. You can discuss the support. Yeah.
Now, are these amendable? So let's say we do a prenup and then, we go 5 years into the marriage and you have a couple kids and now you want to start discussing, okay, if we get divorced and we don't want to affect the kids and so on and so forth. Can you amend the prenup or do you just rip up the prenup and then do a postnup? How does that work?
No, you could always modify the prenup to make it into a postnup.
Okay.
So this is not something that you can never change. You could always modify it.
Okay. So we could basically put anything we want in the pre and postnup. Is that correct?
Well, in the prenup, you just can't, talk about children or child support because the kids may not exist.
What if, that's a good point. Well, what if they had children together before they got married and then now they're officially getting married? Can that be included in the prenup?
Well, that goes into a little bit of technicalities. So if they're not married and they have children, has the father or the other parent signed something called the verified acknowledgement of paternity? Has that happened? And if that's happened, at that point, still with a prenup, there's some case law that dictates that you can't.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So outside of kids, though, we could put basically whatever we want. So I can say my cat's coming with me if we get divorced. I mean,
yeah.
You could say that?
Yeah, you can talk about animals.
Anything legal.
Anything legal. I mean, you can't do anything ridiculous where like a judge cannot enforce it.
Okay.
Remember, if you do enter into a prenup, and let's just say you put something ridiculous on there, like if we were to get a divorce, you have to give me a rose every day, or you have to, give me a box of chocolates or something to compel someone to do something that really is not realistic.
Gotcha.
A judge is not going to enforce that part of the prenup, but they can go ahead and enforce the rest of it.
Okay. I got to ask you this.
Okay.
What is the weirdest or funniest thing you've been asked to put in a prenup?
Oh. Well.
Or something that you said,
always
really?
think, the most unique one that I've ever had went to the nickel and the dime of each one of their pets' names. I've had something where it was even to the specificity of a dress.
Oh, wow.
And really when you're drafting up a prenup or a postnup, it really brings into light, I think, for the parties, whether or not they really should be getting married.
Okay.
And that's why I like prenups and postnups. If you cannot be honest with the other person about your income or your debt or your assets or any of the problems that you have, then maybe you should not be getting with this person.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't disclose everything in your prenup or your postnup, it's not enforceable by law.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to say is I think that's part of why I feel it's taboo in a lot of communities is, one, I think there's this perception that, if you get a prenup, that means you have an intention to divorce me.
No.
And I think that's part of why the taboo is there, but you deal with a lot more. Why do you think there is a taboo? Because there still is a huge taboo. I mean, if I bring up prenups, people will be like, no, that's wrong, that's bad, blah, blah, blah. And I never understood why people are so against it. I mean, I don't have a prenup with my wife. I mean, I was broke as shit when I got married, so maybe that's why. But it was just never something that we even, discussed because it's so taboo in our community. So why do you think that taboo still exists?
I don't know. I mean, when people usually come up to me and they say, why would you want a prenup? you are asking for a divorce. My response is, why do you have car insurance? Are you looking forward to a car accident? Because because prenups really just save you if it comes down to a point of divorce. Why should you spend thousands of dollars on attorney's fees, go through litigation, right? Be in court for 6 months to 2 to 3 years, fighting over stuff that really you could have talked about when you were harmonious with the other person.
And it's much easier to come to agreement when you guys are not trying to kill each other's...
Right, going after blood.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Because, I've even asked you a few times, and I'm like, Mervate, what the hell do divorce attorneys go to trial for 2 weeks for? What do you guys do in trial?
So divorce trials are super complicated, especially when there are kids involved. Okay. So the custody in and of itself, depending on the issues, if there's mental health issues with either of the parents, if there are issues of abuse, if there's a criminal history, the safety of the kids is at issue. All of that gets heard in a trial. If there's an attorney that's appointed for the children, whether as a child representative or a guardian ad litem, that's also brought up in a trial. And when it comes to finances, literally we are dissecting everything, whether it's your bank accounts, your credit card statements, all your assets, your debt. Where is that income coming from? Me as an attorney, I'm always looking, how much can I get my client?
I see.
Yeah.
So, my business clients ask me this all the time, and I have business clients, and, some of them, I even tell them, go speak to an attorney in family law. So the example I get all the time is, hey, man, I just started this company. It's really starting to take off. I don't have a prenup. Now I love my husband or wife, but, I don't know what's going to happen. How does someone... So if they do have a business that's really doing well, how do you recommend that person protect themselves from their spouse in the future?
So if they're asking you this question, usually that means their marriage is not going so well.
It's not a good sign.
Right, it is not a good sign. So, for some people, that's when they start thinking of a postnup. For other people, they try to draft up something like a marital rights waiver. And that's usually even brought up with real estate. So you can come up with something where you can try to divide, the interests or say, like, this is mine and not yours. But I'm sure that's going to bring up other problems, I think, within the marriage. So I always tell people, if you think you're going to be on the brink of a divorce and you and your spouse have spoken about this, then maybe a postnup would be something to consider. Okay.
Because I do, when I advise clients, especially business clients who I feel that their business is really going to take off, I was asking, are you married? And they say, yeah. I'm like, okay, do you have a prenup or anything? I never knew about postnups till we talked about this, and they always say no. And then they start to hesitate, like, wait, so if my company takes off, does my husband get half of it? And my answer is always yes. Am I correct?
So in usual cases, it's half, but the court is a court of equity, right? So it can be divided in other shapes and ways depending on other factors like debt and other assets. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like judges have a lot of discretion in divorce court, and I'm not a fan of judges having too much discretion. And I said this on our first episode with Zaid, and he was more PC than I was, but there's some really, really great judges that I admire, and there's some really shitty ones, and that scares me. Now, he gave me a PC answer that they're all on the bench, blah, 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 but, I don't litigate anymore, so I can say this freely. There's some really terrible judges that don't belong on a bench, I'm sorry, but there's some that I find brilliant, that I think are fair, and there's probably more of those, but all it takes is one bad judge to really make your case go to hell. So do you find that discretion to be a problem at times?
Well, I always encourage my clients to settle if they have the opportunity to settle. If you settle, you're the one who's basically putting down the guidelines for how you want to end your case and live your life. Okay. If you go to trial, the judge is a complete stranger. They know nothing about you. Frankly, they don't care about you, okay? So they are going to rule on whatever they think is reasonable, whether it fits your lifestyle or not, whether it drives you broke or not, whether it's how you're going to see your kids, when you're going to see your kids, and how many times you're going to see your kids. So, even if the judge is not a good judge, fortunately in our system, right, we have a checks and balances. If you can afford it, you appeal it.
But appeals, we all know, are very expensive.
Very costly.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why, and I see your point why prenups are so important, because they're very cost effective and it can just kind of get rid of a lot of headaches, correct?
Definitely.
Okay. So, and that brings us to my next thing that I know you do a lot of, and then something that I think people don't really take advantage of enough, or in my opinion, and some people are going to get upset at me for saying this, they go to the wrong people for this, which is mediation. I'm going to get in trouble for this. I'm not a fan of religious mediation when it comes to divorce and issues. I'm just not. I just don't think they have the expertise to handle it. Too many other factors come into play with this, and it's not against the religion. It's just religious institutions should play their role, and I don't think they should legally mediate. That's just my opinion. Kill me later on Facebook, people. I don't care. I'm expecting it, but you're a big fan of mediation. Explain what mediation is and why you are a fan of it.
So I want to just touch base on something that you said, then I'll jump into mediation. As far as the religious mediation, I know in our community there's been arbitration done by different religious institutions, and they actually make people sign an arbitration contract.
Okay.
And I do agree that I don't think that religious mediation or arbitration is the way to go, unless you want your resolution shaped by religious pillars, and that's the way you want to go.
I'm sorry to cut you. What's the difference between arbitration and mediation?
So with mediation, whatever the outcome is, if you don't agree to it after even you've agreed to it, you don't need to follow it, right? So you can say, I went to mediation, yeah, sure, I agreed with everything. Next day you're like, man, I slept on it and I don't like it. So it's not enforceable.
Gotcha.
Whereas with arbitration,
binding?
It is binding,
Oh, wow.
especially if you're signing a contract, you know? It's binding, it's kind of like a ruling. It can be enforced in court.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the religious institutions do arbitration, not mediation.
Yep, the ones that have people signing off contracts, if you have ever read the contract, it actually says arbitration and has provisions as to how it can be enforced.
Wow.
So I always tell people to make sure they actually read what they're signing.
Oh, our clients do that all the time.
Yeah.
Sarcasm.
Right.
So why are you a big proponent of mediation? I know you got a certification for it, I believe, and
Yeah.
you do a lot more of it. And I know you've always been a fan of mediation. So kind of explain what mediation is and then why you're a fan of it.
Okay, so I did get my training in Northwestern. Mediation is basically for people who are open-minded and want to sit down and actually come to a solution, right?
Okay.
And it's sitting down at the kitchen table and just putting all your problems out there and just wanting to talk about it. With mediation, you don't need to necessarily go to court in order to go to a mediator.
Okay.
You can go to a mediator before you go into court. So I have my mediation clients. Essentially, as a mediator, I'm a third party sitting in. I don't represent either party, right? So I'm there to help guide them come to a solution.
Gotcha.
And all I can do is spew out information or redirect people to try to help them come up with a solution. So most of my clients are people who do want to get a divorce or who do want to modify like their parenting plan and custody. Some people do come to me for recalculation, like modification of their alimony and their child support, because they just want to sit down and discuss it. And again, with mediation, you come up with a solution that is not really made by a judge.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's made by these two people. And then once you mediate and you're 100% in agreement, you can go ahead and put your agreement into a court order and enter it. Now, me as a mediator, I can't do that.
Okay.
I can't go into court and put it into an order for them because I don't represent either of them, right? So they would either go in and do that themselves or they would hire an attorney and the attorney would do it.
Okay. So what separates you from a marriage counselor or marriage therapist? Is it the fine-tuning of knowing, look, if this does go to court, here's what's going to happen? Is that what separates you from a therapist?
It is, and I mean, I don't have the certifications or the education of a counselor or like a therapist or a psychologist at all. So I'm just there to redirect people when they say something that's not reasonable and say, actually, let's look at your problem in a different way.
Okay.
And I think it helps because I do have a law degree and I've been practicing family law. I can tell people information like, the law says this.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, and every lawyer will tell you, or at least any good lawyer will tell you, you are somewhat of a therapist to your clients. I mean, our clients I've heard stories that are not even business related,
Right.
but, they just want to just tell their lawyer. And I think the good lawyers, like yourself, embrace that to a certain point. And I think the good attorneys know that we are, a counselor. And that's part of our job is to really listen to our clients. And even if they go on rants, I do remind them we bill hourly sometimes, but
Right.
I do allow them to kind of express themselves because I do feel it's part of our job. Lawyers are kind of therapists in a lot of ways. And I think you guys more than anyone have that therapist role. Do you agree with that?
No, I definitely agree with it. We do have to deal with our clients' emotions, and we have to, I guess, fine-tune the emotions, because sometimes those emotions, if they're not expressed right or at the right time, may actually ruin a case.
So you kind of, I don't want to say train your clients, but prepare them.
We have to prepare them, and unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the situation that you're in, you have to take the emotion out.
As the attorney or as the client? Or
Sometimes as both.
Really?
Sometimes as both, because once emotion gets involved, I think everything gets diluted, and then you're not, seeing clear, and you just want everyone to know everything about your story, and a lot of it's really not relevant, or it's just about feelings, and, usually a judge does not care about feelings.
So I always ask attorneys this, and I'm going to ask you.
Okay.
What is the one thing you absolutely despise about doing family law, and what is the one thing that makes you love being who you are and doing the job that you do?
I really love family law. I'm trying to find a thing that I don't like about family law. I will say maybe when dealing with the wrong attorney on the other side.
I hear that a lot from family attorneys.
Yeah, that is when I do not like my job. But otherwise, I really like my job. I mean, people come to you at their worst point, right? And their family is essentially breaking down, it's being disassembled, and you're helping them start their new page in life.
And that's what you love about it the most?
Yeah.
Awesome. Which is a good transition to, this being I think it's Women's History Month, Women's Appreciation Month. So, we always do kind of our whole month on women in law and philanthropy and business and stuff like that. So I kind of want to discuss a little bit about, women in law in general, kind of from a more broad perspective. But I have a lot of friends who are women attorneys. Most of them are phenomenal attorneys. I mean, they're just brilliant, brilliant attorneys. And I've had some say judges have told them paralegals are not allowed at the bench. I've heard some that were treated as the intern in court. I mean, I can go on and on of stories. And I no exaggeration, these are brilliant attorneys that will do circles around me in court. But they never get the benefit of the doubt. So I guess my first question to you is, how do you think women are treated differently than men in the legal world in general?
So in general, I do think women have to work harder. It's unfortunate, but it's just the real deal. I think especially with, I would say, the more senior generation of lawyers, it's more of an attorney-to-attorney relationship. I would say personally, I've never been treated differently by judges because I'm a woman.
Okay.
And maybe it's because I'm in family law, and now the newer generation of lawyers are women.
Okay.
Predominantly, I would
family
say.
law?
In family law. It's more women than men.
Okay.
So I think that's when it's different. I've had unique and outrageous stories happen, whether it's to me or the other attorney that works for me, happen, by different attorneys. And it's usually more senior attorneys, and it's male attorneys. Whether I was called like little girl or
Wow,
or whether I was told that I was too young to understand.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because really, if you look at it, the law has changed, buddy, right?
Yeah.
So I know the law just as much as you know the law. And I have, the same enthusiasm, if not more, than you do. So by trying to belittle or degrade an attorney because she's a woman or because she's younger really is not going to make her back down. It's going to put the fire in her belly to make sure she beats you. So
let's just say it's majority old white men.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It's okay. We speak freely on this show. And I'm surprisingly actually a little shocked at that extent. And to your point about a lot more women doing family law, it makes a good point because a lot of the stories that I was saying were women who practice criminal law. And I think it's kind of reversed. There's not as many women in criminal law on the defense side. Okay. There's a lot of women prosecutors. There's more women judges now. So I think on the prosecution side, so this is when I was practicing criminal defense, there wasn't too many women on the defense side, but the ones that were such killers because they kind of had to be, and they were in, a man's world. I mean, I even used to get crap as a male because I wasn't old and white, and these women would kind of get that. So I found that a lot in the criminal world. The business world is, I think it's a middle between family law and criminal. I think there's more, but a lot of my opposing counsel, say, or who I'm negotiating with, are still males in the corporate business world. So I know you do some corporate stuff, but what is it you think about family law that a lot of women practice in that arena?
So I think with family law, you need to be compassionate, you need to be empathetic, and really, I think people look at it as I am helping different people.
So men are not empathetic? No, I'm just joking. I'm totally joking.
Not to be sexist.
I'm totally kidding.
Oh, man. But, yeah, no, I think women just feel like they can put in their all in family law and see the changes that they are making.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there is a sense of, especially when you represent women who are, they're very vulnerable. This might be a reverse sexist comment, but I just think you're going to empathize with the woman a little bit more than, a lot of males can empathize with the woman in that situation. Do you agree with that or no?
I think for me it depends on the situation. I've actually had male clients seek out a female attorney.
Really?
Yeah.
And why do you think that is?
And the usual reason is they think that women do work harder. That I do
agree with that.
Yeah, and that the women would essentially be putting a lot more of themselves and their efforts into the case.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I do agree with that. And I always tell people this all the time. My best interns have been women. My paralegal's a woman. My law clerk was a woman. And the reason is, it's not I specifically look for women, but they just were sharper. They worked harder.
We're bomb. That's really it.
I mean, it really is like, and I always tell the young male attorneys, you guys better step it up because these women are here and they're here to stay. And, excuse my language, they're not fucking around. Like, they're coming and they don't care that, they're female or not. They're coming and they're coming hard. And I just seriously found all of my best interns and law clerks were women, and they just really kicked ass, and they embraced learning, but they also put the effort in. And I hate to say this, they didn't feel entitled. And I think that was the biggest issue, where it was, I'm going to come in, I'm going to listen, I'm going to learn, but I'm going to do what I do and show them that I can do this. Did you have that sense when you first came out, or do you get that sense from other women attorneys?
I definitely do get that sense from other women attorneys. I think women as a whole have struggled to get to where they are now, because if you look in the past, women weren't really treated, obviously, the same as men. I mean, even right now in the legal world, we're not really treated the same as men.
In what ways?
Well, like I said, for me, it's between attorney to attorney. Okay. So, I shouldn't have to go through name calling or, right, verbal fighting with an attorney over a case that I'm working on, just because I'm younger, just because I'm a woman, or just because they think I'm too aggressive. But women in the past, they were told, to only stay in a law office and just dictate pleadings or do the discovery and not necessarily go to court. And now it's really good that women are really the face of whatever law firms they work for or for their own firms. So I definitely do think women are trying to leave their mark, and they're certainly doing that.
You used a key word that I think almost all my women friend attorneys drives them nuts. Aggressive. If a woman is aggressive, I'm going to use this word, she's being a bitch. Yep. If a guy's being aggressive, he's a hell of an attorney. Right. Do you agree with that? The perception of that.
I do, because people still perceive it as that. They definitely do perceive it as that. I think women do, even still in the family law arena, get looked at differently depending even on their marital status.
Really?
Yeah. I've had opposing counsels who are male who would say something like, well, we don't know whether Miss Mohammad has kids or not. She might not understand anything about kids.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, excuse me, did I even ask you about whether or not you had children? How is this even relevant to my lawyering skills?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I definitely do think that the men in the legal world need to work on how they actually interact with women. I don't think women need to work on anything at all when it comes to interacting with other attorneys. I definitely do think that men need to be more sensitive in what it is that they do say, because if I was a man, I don't think anybody would care whether or not I had children, whether or not I was in a relationship, whatever. So I do think that there needs to be some sort of training, maybe, for my male counterparts as to how to deal with female attorneys.
Yeah, and the question I want to ask, do you find the age gap the issue? So younger male attorneys, do you find them a little bit more respectful of you than, say, the 60, 70-year-old old white men?
Yeah, so like the attorneys within like my age group or the younger attorneys, I've never had a problem with them. There's never been any name calling. There's never been any, downplay of whatever your relationship status is, because I think there's a mutual respect. We all went to law school. We worked really hard. We passed the bar, and now we're working our butts off to, represent our clients. Whereas I think maybe the older generation sees it more as an intimidation factor if it's a female attorney who is, aggressive. Yeah.
And I just think they're just, the time they came out, there just wasn't that many women attorneys, and the tide has shifted, and they're just not used to it. And you look at all studies right now, women are outnumbering men in law school applications, in law school numbers. They're coming out in higher numbers, which I find fascinating because I always complain, the legal world is by far the slowest industry to update itself with modern times. I always find that we're still very old school, but yet women don't care. They're not scared of that, and they're still coming into law school in high numbers. Why do you think that is?
Well, even though women are coming into law school in high numbers, there's been journal articles that were done, I believe, by the ABA and even the CBA, that women are leaving the legal field, within their 40s. And because you pointed out, the legal arena is so old school, it does take forever for anything to change. I don't think that the legal arena is very women friendly, especially for women who want to start families and have children, because it is so demanding, because you're expected to bill whatever hours, you're expected to comply with whatever deadlines. So I think women maybe go into law school with like, okay, yeah, we're going to change the world, go ahead, be a lawyer. But then once you get into the legal field, depending on what area you're practicing in, it might not be sustainable if you're looking to start a family.
Yeah, I find that to especially be prevalent in big law. I'm not a huge fan of big law. I don't care for it. I never did. I think the perception that a lot of the perceptions we're talking about is in big law. When I say big law, I'm not going to name any firms, but the huge firms, and the one where as much as women are coming out in higher numbers, if you look at the level of partners being appointed in big law, it's still very lagging in appointing women as partners in a lot of these big firms. And that's why I see the trend in women attorneys going towards opening up their own law practice, because I think it gives them that autonomy, it gives them that freedom. A lot of the same reasons that I opened mine, because I was always worried, I'm young, I'm brown, I'm Muslim, my name is Mohammad Ramadan. I was always scared of that opportunity. So I think a lot of women kind of see it that way as well. It's like, hold up, I'm not going to work for big law for 15 years and then keep getting passed up for partner. I'll just go open up my own, and then if I have to have kids, I'll set it up, and if I want to have a family, I have that autonomy. So do you see a trend in women going more the route you and I did, which is opening up your own law practice because of that?
Yeah, I do see a lot more small firms opening up or solo practitioners. And I think, like you said, it's because you have that flexibility. You get to dictate your schedule. You get to decide if you want to hire on certain clients or if you don't want to hire on certain clients, in what type of area of law you want to practice. So I think especially for whether it's women or men who are looking to do anything with their lives, like starting a family or want to pursue maybe a more unique area of like a second revenue, or like just take on more hobbies, or maybe don't want to practice law full time. The only way to do it is maybe to have your own firm and to have that flexibility, or work as a contracted attorney so you still have that flexibility. Right. So, I mean, you can do a lot of things with a law degree, right? So you don't necessarily have to be a practicing attorney.
Right. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I kind of wanted to end on this, but what do you say to all the young, or not even young, just the women out there who are really considering law but are scared of these things, and they're a little worried about the glass ceiling and going through all these things, but they really want to get into law? What is the one thing that you would tell them if they came to you? So
I'm very realistic. I think before you consider going into law school, whether you're a woman or a man, think of the debt.
That's my first thing I tell them.
Yeah. Think of the debt.
And you're not going to make $1 million coming out.
Right. And then think about how passionate you are about the law, And I would say go ahead and shadow a couple of attorneys. Is this something you really want to do? Because once you apply to law school, once you go to law school, that is the biggest commitment you are making with your life, your time, your money. Some people have shadowed attorneys. I've had clerks who have actually come work with me in the summer. And they're just like, there's no way, I don't want to be a lawyer because I didn't know you have to be in court for this much time.
Right.
Or I didn't know you sit behind a desk and just type up pleadings and do research most of the time. I thought it was like the TV shows. Yeah. And it's like, no, we're not that,
Saint Suits.
It's not like something comes busting in the door in court and all of a sudden you have a winning case, So I definitely think do your research before you go into law school, before you decide that you want to be a lawyer. For women, a law degree definitely will empower you. And like I said, it doesn't mean you have to be a lawyer if you have a law degree. All these other areas, all these other markets, they love lawyers because lawyers, they analyze, they know where to look, they question, right? They're also observers. So you can make a change whether you have a law degree or not. But if you decide to have a law degree, just make sure you're going to put it into use and make sure you love what you're doing, or else you're going to regret going to law school.
What's interesting about your answer, what I liked about it is that's exactly what I tell law students, and it doesn't matter male or female. So I think it applies all across the board. And I always tell people, when you have a law degree, you kind of have this instant credibility when you approach another job or a company. You have added value, right? It just gives you added value. Now, I always tell them, if you got to consider the debt and consider that this is not Suits or My Cousin Vinny, that you're not going to have this aha moment. You're not going to walk out to the press and media.
Right.
You are going to be putting sometimes 80, 100 hours a week, especially if you own your own practice. If you don't work, you don't get paid. So I do give them that dose of reality. I say, look, if you're okay with that, I love being an attorney.
Yeah.
Some days I can't stand it, but overall, I really do enjoy it. So that's very interesting that basically your advice is the same that I say to everybody else. So before we end, you gave some really good info, and I think a lot of people might want to contact you after this. So give us some of your social media, give us your contact, give us your website, whatever it is. How can people get in touch with you?
You could definitely call my office at 708-210-9247. Look us up on the web, kiswanilawfirm.com. We also have a Facebook page for Kiswani Law, and on Instagram, it's Kiswani_law.
Awesome. Mervate, you were as awesome as I expected you to be, and that's why I asked you to come on. You really know your stuff, so
Thanks,
I really do
Mohammad.
appreciate you coming on. Now it's time for my Minute with Mo. This one might be a little bit longer than my normal one, but it kind of hits close to home, being that it is Women's Month. The reason it means a lot to me is I had 3 mentors in law school. All 3 were women. Wasn't kind of by choice, but these 3 women kind of took me in. I was never an A student. I was never even a B student in law school. I was bottom maybe 20% of my class, and these professors just didn't care. They believed in me before I believed in myself. They were tough as nails, but they made me reach another gear that I didn't even know I had. I always the funny story, and sorry, Professor Grosso, but I have to tell this story. I had her for research and writing. The topic was basically prisons in America, and I remember I was doing edit after edit after edit, and after about the sixth edit, going back and forth with her, I'm like, yes, I got this. I'm almost done. And I'll never forget, and I walked in her office. I was geeked up. I spent so many hours, so many long nights, and I sat down with her, and she's like, all right, we're getting there. I'm like, what do you mean we're getting there? I'm like, I thought we were there. She's like, Mo, you got better. Keep going. And I absolutely hated her, okay? She knows this. I absolutely despised her at the time. I'm like, why did I take this lady's class? She's going to drive me nuts, so on and so forth. But I did have another gear that I didn't know I had, and she pushed me towards that, and she made me better. Professor Lawton made me view things that I never thought I would view in a certain way, and she was my contracts professor. She was my favorite professor of all time. She's still, and she knows this, she's one of my worst grades that I ever had in law school. But I didn't care because I learned so much from her. And she taught me how to think, and she taught me how to be aggressive, and she taught me how to fight for my clients regardless of who's on the other side. Professor Dandridge took me in, and being a minority, she taught me reality and said, you are going to hit a bump in the road. There are going to be people that don't like you. Well, who gives a shit? Keep going. They instilled a confidence in me that at the time I never had. So I'm always forever indebted to them. And, that's my way of saying it doesn't matter who it is. The right people in your life will come in, embrace it. And, I'm forever thankful for these women because I, honest to God, would not be the attorney I am today without them. So for those three, I'm forever grateful. That is the show, and we'll be back next time within a moment. This is your host, Mohammad Ramadan, and we'll see you again.